sharp, that's when the signal shines in. Got the mic set up and the camera spin. Grab a coffee, pull up your chair, join the drive. 'Cause the only place to be on a Monday night at 9 is right here, alive. We're drilling down deep on the legend of fur, the biggest mystery ever did stir. It's Sasquatch Watch Radio, tune into the same with Gary Kendrick hosting with King. He's heard the howls, he's caught the form's trace, a true seeker leading the chase. Something stirs out in the shadowy wood, let's uncover it together, just like we should. The team is geared up, the map is laid clear. We bring expert voices where the facts appear. We feature top names on this digital plane, from Meldrum's big theories to Strange Rich Strain. With Lyle Blackburn and Scott Violet online, we chase the elusive one sighting at a time. It's Sasquatch Watch Radio, tune into the screen with Gary Kendrick host of the scene. He's heard the howls, he's seen the dark form, a true eyewitness leading the storm. Something is lurking out in the dark wood, let's find it together, just like we should. We give you the legends, the truth laid raw, and a unique track for the tale of the law. So subscribe to the channel, heed the lead, we're planting knowledge, pulling up the weed. Yeah, Monday night, 9 Eastern, YouTube Live. Sasquatch Watch Radio, where the quest thrives.
Hey, all right, everybody. Trying a new intro out tonight. If you guys don't care, just let me know what you think about it. But tonight is Monday night. We're getting ready to get squatchy. It's October the 6th, 2025. And tonight we've got a great guest coming on, Gene Brock. Gene is the founder, director, and CEO of Kentucky Center for Bigfoot Research. And he's also an archaeologist and an anthropologist and a musician. So let's get right into it. We're going to bring Gene on.
Hey, Gary, how are you?
Just fine. How are you, brother?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm glad to have you. That's what I told you earlier. I like to have somebody on that has a similar accent to mine. That way I don't sound so icky, I guess.
It's easier to talk to like vocally people.
It is. And I swear, and I don't care what kind of initials you have in front of your name. I don't care what kind of jobs that you performed or whatever, or anything like that. As soon as you go somewhere and you have a Southern accent, people automatically think you're stupid.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's pitiful, but it's the truth. It really is.
Absolutely is. It's very a stereotype that is hard to get over, is what it is.
It really is. But I'm kind of proud of my hillbilly roots.
I wouldn't trade mine for nothing.
No, sir. Well, anyway, we're going to hop right into it if you don't care.
Okay.
Gene, we glad to have you on tonight, and I'd like for you to tell us about your very first encounter that actually got you interested in Sasquatch research.
Well, my first introduction to a Sasquatch type creature was actually an encounter that my father was involved in. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, my father was a over the road truck driver, and he come back. He had been on a run from Michigan to Florida, and on 75 there is an area that the state line of going into Tennessee called Jellico Mountain. And my father was going down through there, and the guy behind him started yelling that a Bigfoot had crossed the road behind Dad's truck. And he was even telling the people on the other side of the interstate to watch that thing that was fixing to cross the road. Well, they got to riding him pretty hard, of course, so he just turned off his CB, and he passed Dad going down the other side of the mountain, and they pulled off into one of the truck stops at the foot of the hill. And Dad pulled in behind him and got out and was talking to him. And Dad said he was visibly shaking, that he was kind of pale and his hands were still trembling. And Dad was talking to him, and he said, "Buddy, are you sure it wasn't a bear?" Which, of course, you know, there's bears in that area. And the guy said, "Damn it, man, I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. I know what a bear looks like." And that was not a bear. And it crossed the interstate in 3 steps. And so Dad come back and told the story to me. And of course, that set my fascination into motion. So if you fast forward to where I was about 13 or 14 years old, we were in West Kentucky, Muhlenberg County, hunting on Peabody Coal Company.
Oh, the old John Prine song.
Exactly. We were not very far from Paradise, as a matter of fact. It's just down the road. But we were hunting along the Pond River. At that time, Peabody was 62,000 acres. And nobody ever done anything out there. They'd go out ever so often and scratch around a little bit to keep their permits and stuff validated. But we were I was hunting in a big field, which that's the way the strip mine stuff works. It's big flat fields that are growed up, and then little spoil banks along the side of it. Well, I was standing in this one field, and my dad had went down a deep holler. And of course, this was an original holler. It had never been strip mined. It was wide open. You could see for a pretty good ways down through it. But I'm standing there. It's about, I don't know, 3:30, 4 o'clock, maybe 4:30. And I hear my dad shoot 3 times. Now, it wasn't the distress 3 rapid shots that people use as emergency signals. It was deliberate aimed shots. It was bang, bang, bang. And I'd hunted with my dad my whole life, of course, so I knew what his gun sounded like, and I knew it was him. So I eased over to where I could see down the holler, thinking he had been shooting at some deer, and maybe they'd come up through there and I could get a shot at one. Well, I didn't see anything, and I was standing there, and I started hearing people talking. And I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it was sapient sentences. It was obviously 2 individuals. And I decided, okay, Dad's got a deer down and there's somebody else down there. I'll go down and see if I can help. Now, like I said, this is a big long holler, and you can see real far down it. It's open. It's old growth timber, except right at the very bottom, which is a wet weather creek. There's a spring there, you know, that comes up when it rains. And there was a lot of vegetation down at the bottom of it. So I take off going down through the holler, and I'm working my way down toward the bottom as I'm going away down the holler. And I get about 50, 60 yards from this tall vegetation, and the woods are quiet. You know, it had nothing to do with the encounter, like people talk about the woods going silent. The woods were just quiet. My dad was just shot a 30-06 3 times down through there. The woods were quiet.
Yeah, there ain't nothing moving after that.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm about 50, 60 yards away, and two animals run out of the brush, and they're running straight at me. Um, I don't like to use the word charging so much because I think I just happened to be in their way. I don't think they were deliberately coming for me. But these animals, it wasn't the standard 8 foot tall bipedal walking Bigfoot encounter. These two individuals were down on all fours. They were in a quadruped motion, kind of a cross between a great ape knuckle walking and the way a hyena looks. The butt was lower than the shoulders, and then the leg bone kind of went up and then went down to the foot in kind of a V. So they were hunched down, but on all fours moving. They had hair on them that was reddish brown, about 3 to 4 inches, maybe a touch longer. Flat face, no snout or anything like that. They were not canines. No ears that we could see or I could see at that time. But they're running straight at me, and in my 13-year-old mind, I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what this is, but it needs to die. And so I yank my gun up and I pull the trigger. I don't even think I aimed. I just pointed the barrel at them. And about that time, there was the awfulest noise behind me. And I remember thinking, they've got me surrounded. So I spun around to see what was coming behind me. And it was a gray squirrel about 5 foot from my head going up a hickory tree. Now, why he hadn't took off any of those other times and instead of waiting for me to shoot that gun, I can't tell you. But I spun back around to the danger that I knew was coming. And these animals had already crossed back across the brush creek area and were halfway up the other side of the holler. And I shot another time. I shot a total of 3 times. I don't know if it was 2 when I first saw him or 2 after the squirrel. It's a little jumbled up right there. It's kind of exciting at that particular moment. So I don't know if it was 2 before the squirrel or 2 after the squirrel, but I shot a total of 3 times, and I never laid a bullet on them at all. Didn't touch a hair. So after that happened, I thought, okay, I'm going back to the field where I can see what's coming at me. Dad can deal with his own deer, you know. And so I go back up there and I finish the hunt. I'm not really freaked out or scared or anything like that. It was just something weird in the woods. As far as I'm concerned, I've got the biggest gun that you can be packing around. I'm not scared of anything I can encounter with a 30-06 in my hands, you know. And so it got dark. I went back to deer camp, and Dad showed up a little bit later, and I got to talking to him, and he was shooting at the same animals that I was shooting at. He saw them at about 100 yards, so he didn't get as good a look at them, but his description was basically the same as mine. So the reason I bring up the hearing somebody talking is when these animals come out of the brush, when they saw me, they started jabbering back and forth to each other. Now, it wasn't the sapient sentence sound that I heard before I went down in the holler. It was more like the squawking that you would encounter if you walked up on a group of chimpanzees in a jungle. Just, you know, just squeals and squawks back and forth. But the thing that always kind of laid in the back of my mind about that, were they squealing to each other because they were side by side and saw me, or were they squealing for mom or dad that I never saw?
Oh yeah.
And so that's always one thing that's kind of weighed heavy in the back of my mind, but they were definitely what was talking that I heard. So I know on the Sierra sounds that they recorded in California, there is two different versions of them talking. One is where it's, what they call the samurai chatter, which they theorize is them talking slowly trying to talk to Ron and Barry at that time. And then the other time when they're just vocalizing to each other, it's real sped up. And the real sped up sound that you hear on the Sierra sounds is what is very similar to what they were doing when they saw me. They were very excited and jabbering back and forth.
Well, see, that brings me to another question. Do you feel that these sounds that these two particular animals were making, do you feel that was some type of language? Do you think, or was it just more? I mean, all animals communicate, and that's the thing.
Right.
People try to use those interchangeably, and you can't. There's a difference between language and communication.
Yeah, absolutely. The first vocals that I heard when I was standing in the field, that was definitely a language, because it had, like I said, it had sapient sentence rhythm to it. The one individual would stop talking before the other one started talking. They were not talking over top of each other. So it was a conversation that was being had. Now, what was being said, I couldn't tell you. It was right on the edge of my hearing. And, sound travels a long distance, especially up a holler. You know this.
Oh, yeah.
So, I have no idea where they was. My dad was 300 or 400 yards down the holler, maybe farther. But the first sound was definitely a conversation. Now, the second sound, when they saw me and just started their squawking, for lack of a better word, it was more like just communication, just a call and response kind of thing. But it did not have any rhythm to it. They were both jabbering over top of the other one. Just like if two or three people, got a jump scare and they all yelled, "Wah," or something, everybody's doing it at the same time. And that's the way the second sounds were. But I do feel like the first sounds that I heard while I was standing in the field was definitely language-based communication.
Do you think that, like the squawking that you heard, when, do you think that may have been like a distress call or something like that? Because, I know you mentioned that, you was kind of concerned about them making that noise and, trying to call up, an adult from
mom or dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it was something along those lines, because it was very high pitched, in tone. It was short snips of sound. So I would describe it as distress calls, or at least surprise calls. When they come out, it's kind of hard to explain, but there was definitely a difference in their body language and demeanor, for lack of a better word, when they first come out of the brush, till when they realized, hey, somebody's there, because they run out. And I won't say that they threw the brakes on and stopped, because when they come out, all this happened in just a few split seconds. And even though I didn't feel threatened, I didn't know what this was. And in my mind, I needed to kill one of these to figure out what this was. I know that's not really a popular line of thought now, but you got to remember this was in the early 80s. You know, this was 83, 84. There wasn't supposed to be nothing down there but deer, you know.
Mhm.
Even if it was a bear and I didn't know what a bear looked like, I would be proven that there were bears in the area, you know. And that was kind of my thinking. And when they run out, and like I said, all of it happened real quick, I assessed the situation and felt compelled to discharge my weapon. But like I said, when they come out, there was like a brief pause, and that was when I fired my gun.
Mhm.
And then I heard the noise behind me and spun around. And then by the time I focused back on the animals, they had crossed and were going back up the other side of the hill.
Mhm.
And that was when I shot again, or the two times, or whatever. But there was definitely a change in them. There was never any aggression. I don't want to make it sound like, you know, they were going into attack mode or anything like that. I mean, they run out and it was almost like, oh crap, and turn around and run the other direction, you know. As far as feeling threatened, I was not justified in firing my weapon because of that.
Yeah.
I I discharged my weapon because of, I guess, curiosity. I didn't know what this was. And the only way for me to know what this was to put one on the ground, because
Mhm.
this was unlike any animal that I had ever laid eyes on. Uh, you know, as a matter of fact, because at that time, even though I knew that there had been a Sasquatch supposedly crossed the road behind my dad in Tennessee,
Mhm.
Bigfoot was one animal. You know, there was only one, and he lived in California or Oregon, somewhere out there. You know, this wasn't supposed to be here. And I remember even then I was thinking that it looked more like a hyena in the way that they walked,
Mhm.
just that simple stance that they had. So I was just killing it to call a game warden and say, I don't know what this is. Come and tell me what we've got running around the woods with us. And so there was never any aggression. I never felt threatened at all during this encounter.
Well, you mentioned the quadrupedal movement, and that's something that I'm really fascinated in because I've had a sighting myself, but mine was the upright, 8 foot tall walking
Sure.
animal. I've never seen the quadrupedal, but I'm convinced that it happens because there's too many people that talk about it. But what can you tell us about that quadrupedal movement? What do you
Uh, you mean observed or book knowledge?
either or? I'm good
Uh,
with both.
well, the what I observed, I mean, like I said, it was a combination between knuckle walking and the way a hyena looks.
Mm-hmm.
But the butt was lower. You know, a standard great ape, when he knuckle walks, he's more vertical in his torso. He might be tilted just a little bit, depending on how long his arms are, because they usually a great ape usually just grazes the ground with his knuckles until he stops and firmly plants.
Mm-hmm.
These were, I mean, I could tell that they had hands, but they were firmly on the ground every step. I really can't remember if they were, you know, straight down or were they making a fist. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
remember that detail. Uh, but the one thing I can tell you is I've never seen an animal move as fast as these do.
Oh
And
wow.
I keep talking about the holler, and I never feel like when I come on, you know, various shows and talk about it that I give the holler justice. I just say it's a holler, it's wide open, and it's long. You know, this holler was very steep. It was
Mm-hmm.
probably coming down the sides. It's probably 200 yards or more from the top to the bottom if you walked straight down it. Probably
Yeah.
closer to 250. Uh, if you were standing up at the top and you were trying to shoot all the way across, it's probably 400 yards across the top of that holler. Uh, You know, it really takes somebody like yourself that is familiar with hollers to know what I'm actually trying to say. Um, you know, and it didn't come down into a solid V. It come down and it had, you know, 50, 75 yards of flatness in the bottom, you know, and that's where that wet weather stream was.
Yep.
But it just, in the length of time that it took me to fire my weapon, spin around like this, and see that there's a squirrel, and then turn back around, these things have covered well over 150 yards going
Good.
back up that holler. They busted through the brush and they were gone. When I discharged my weapon after the squirrel event, I wasn't like this. I was like this because they were already up that far up the side of the holler. So that's the biggest thing I can tell you about the encounter and the quadrupedal motion is
Hmm.
that it made them unbelievably fast. I have never seen one on two legs. Everybody talks about how quick they move and how silently they move. Um, these animals were moving silently. Because, like I said, when I went down the holler, there was no noise to begin with, but I never heard them running up the holler. And I, a couple of people have asked me, well, did I think they were standing there and when they saw me, they run out? No, because that would be, from a animalistic standpoint, that would be um, in, incomprehensible. Because why would you see something and run toward it when you want to go away from it?
Yep.
I think they were coming up that creek bank, you know, that slate rock that had eroded after some. I think they were running up that. They busted um, out of the brush, saw me, and turned around. Because if they were sitting there waiting on me, it would not make sense to run out and then freak out and turn around and go back the other way. They
Hmm.
would do just like a deer, you know. They would see me and then they would run the other way just out of pure instinct. Um, so that's several things that other people have asked me that I always kind of felt like I didn't explain real well. Even after all these that I've done on this, you know, every time I get off one of these, I'm like, well, I didn't really give that justice or or explain that real well. But
Yeah.
that's about all I can tell you about the quadrupedalism that I observed. Just the
Now,
way
in
that they
my
were,
encounter, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut
uh,
you off.
just the way that they were, that their butt was lower than their shoulders.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and then at the butt where the hip would be at, then the thigh bone ran up at an angle to the knee and then come back down for the shin bone to the foot. And that was the stance they had. And these creatures were probably 4 foot tall at the shoulder, 3.5 to 4 feet tall at the shoulder, even down on all fours.
That's
So
impressive.
so when they stood up, I theorized that they were probably 5 to 6 feet tall standing up. So they were not, they weren't babies, but they were not adults. So I I've come to the conclusion that they were juvenile Sasquatches.
Hmm.
Um, After the encounter, you know, we kind of played it off that it was some weird canine that we had never seen before. I think that was mostly just to give ourselves peace of mind, because there at Peabody, it's there used to be a lot of people hunted there, but it was very isolated because there was so much of it, and you could be they had a large coyote population,
Yeah.
and you could be sitting there in the woods, and all at once the coyotes would start howling, and it would feel like you were totally surrounded by the coyotes. There were so many of them, and every now and then there would be just a deeper bellow howl that would happen, and then the coyotes would take off. we would be going to our stand of a morning, and all at once we would hear what we now know as a tree knock, and we think, well, a limb fell somewhere, or you would hear rocks being banged together. And every person in our hunting party has experienced these, and we'd be like, well, it was a raccoon banging something, together, or whatever, trying to bust open a shell to eat, even though the closest creek was 2 miles away, but we would hear all these things, and looking back, if you pieced it all together, it just makes sense that that's what we were experiencing. We just didn't know what it was. And so with my fascination with Sasquatch and what we experienced all the years hunting down there, because we still go down there and hunt. We were down there last year, as a matter of fact, and we have been going since I was 12 years old. So we've been going for 40 years down there, and this type of activity has always been ongoing. And it really didn't matter. I mean, we always kind of hunted in the same general area. We moved a couple of times to different places, but there was always that same type of activity, regardless of where we was. And you would, like I said, you would hear weird howls and tree knocks, rock clacking, just a general creepiness in the woods sometimes, just like I'm being watched, and you look all around and you can't find it. And like I said, I've hunted since I was 8 years old. Started deer hunting when I was 11. And so I was raised in the woods. The woods do not creep me out. There has been a few times where I have felt totally creeped out in the woods, but on a general outdoorsman level, the woods do not bother me. So, there's just something about the area. And if you go to the BFRO or some of the other websites that document encounter stories, there is at least 6 or 7 now, maybe even a little bit more than that, Class A eyewitness encounters that have happened within 2 miles of where my encounter happened. So the area is prone for Bigfoot activity. And of course, you got Land Between the Lakes is an hour down the road, and all about Land Between the Lakes. So
it's all right there together, I'm pretty sure.
It's all right there together, and I've spent a whole lot of time at Land Between the Lakes too, and it does not disappoint.
Well, Jane, I know when I initially contacted you, I asked you what type of music that you liked.
Yeah.
And we've had AI create a song for you.
Okay.
And it's about the halfway point of the show, so I'll go ahead and get that tuned up, and we'll give her a listen.
Okay.
Grows beneath the tall pines where the river flows. You won't find no mansions, no silver spoon, just a muddy tire track beneath a faded moon. We're headed deep into the Bluegrass State to knock on the door of a man of great faith, a man who's seen something that much is clear and spent all his life trying to conquer that fear. Oh, Gene Brock with a map and a degree, hunting the shadows of a great mystery. From Jellico Mountain to the Daniel Boone ground, the Kentucky Center for Bigfoot is where he is found. With a sign spine, the heart of raw is hiding in the Kentucky tree. He wasn't some dreamer just chasing the fat. He was a boy with his father, a young hunting lad. Then came the encounter, a memory profound that put his whole life on a different path around. He picked up the books, earned the proper respect, got his anthropology for the facts to protect. Said a legend's not real till the proof is well stacked. So he hit the deep woods and he never looked back. Oh, Gene Brock with a map and a degree, hunting the shadows of a great mystery. From Jellico Mountain to the Daniel Boone ground, the Kentucky Center for Bigfoot is where he is found. With a science mind, a heart, a raw sight, he's building a credible case in the dead of the night. He'll track every howl, every footstep he sees, convinced the Sasquatch is hiding in the Kentucky trees. He talks about rock throwing in sounds in the dark, the kind of wild terror that leaves a deep mark. He's not telling tales just to sell you a beer. He's analyzing data year after long year. He's a scientist to witness a difficult role, searching for a creature that won't show its soul. Oh, Gene Brock with a map and a degree, hunting the shadows of a great mystery. From Jellico Mountain to the Daniel Boone ground, the Kentucky Center for Bigfoot is where he is found. With a science mind, a heart, a raw sight, he's building a credible case in the dead of the night. He'll track every howl, every footstep he sees, convinced the Sasquatch is hiding in the Kentucky trees. So tune in and listen, for the night settles deep to the promise that Kentucky's secrets still keep. Yeah, the key to the puzzle, they say it all lies in the deep woods where the wild legend cries.
Love it. It's got a good beat and I can dance to it. That's great.
Yeah, I've got to be honest. That right there is probably my new favorite.
It's pretty good.
That is. You know, you said you like honky tonk, and I have to be honest with you. That's about as, you know, straightforward honky tonk, you know, dirty country, whatever you want to call it, that you can get. That was a good one.
Shuffle out of A, it sounded like, so it's a good country key.
Well, James, I'm going to get into it again here. I know you've got the degrees. You're an archaeologist. You're an anthropologist.
Well, and most archaeologists are anthropologists. Mm-hmm. Anthropology has 4 subdisciplines that make up the field. It's cultural, which is just the study of human beings. You've got primatology, which is, of course, primates. You got linguistics, which is the study of language. And then, of course, you have archaeology. Now, what drove me to anthropology was, of course, all my Bigfoot experience. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn about the evolution of our species as well as other ones. Where does this creature fit in at? Of course, I took a lot of the primate classes as well, but you know, let's face it, I live in Kentucky. Unless I want to work at a zoo, there's not a lot of primate jobs in Kentucky. So I specialized in archaeology, Native American Civil War, as a matter of fact. But archaeology is a field where, you know, most people say, well, what are you looking for? I don't know. I ain't found it yet. You know, we don't know what we're looking for until we find it. The simple fact that we're looking for something, that's the thing. But I don't remember where we were going with that, but that's the 4 fields that make up anthropology. You know, it's not that I have an anthropology degree and then got a archaeology degree. Archaeology is my minor out of anthropology, and that's how you specialize.
Yes,
so
sir. But with your degrees and stuff, and your experience with Sasquatch, has that changed like your field work in archaeology, your experience with Sasquatch, or has like your experience with archaeology kind of changed your thoughts about Sasquatch?
No on both of those. Um, we when we do field work, most of the time it is in, and when I say field work in this context, I mean archaeological field work. When we're on a project, um, let's use the example of earlier in the summer we did a 100-mile road that just went through the wilderness. Basically, they're
Mhm.
proposing to put a road through there. Now, the way these projects work is they will take, okay, we're going to put a road from point A to point B. And here is 3 different routes that we can take to do this road project. What we will do is we will go take a survey of the one that they want to use the most. So
Okay.
if they want to use path B, we will go do a survey on path B. And based upon what we find along that survey, we can give the go ahead for the road, or we can absolutely shut the road entirely down and they have to go someplace else and build it.
Mm-hmm.
It actually yields quite a bit of power in a weird sort of way, because we can make a, you know, $4 or $5 million project cost $10 million because it's got to go someplace else. But on the same token, sometimes the best way to protect something is to pave over top of it. So, based upon what we find, but say like we found a Native American camp or something, and we done our phase 1, which basically a phase 1, we walk that 100-mile stretch of road and we dig a hole every 20 meters. We'll dig a hole, and you do that the entire way. And if we find something, then based on what we find, we can justify it going to a phase 2 or phase 3, which is where, like when you watch shows about Egypt and they're down in the little square pit and they've got their concrete trowel and they're scraping the dirt, that's a phase 2 and 3. That's the one everybody wants to work on, because you usually drive the truck right up to where you're going to work at. And you don't have to walk 100 miles carrying a bunch of gear. But anyway, if we found something and it's not worthy of being a you know historic spot, or to that, just use that for a term, it's not worthy of being a noted historic spot, we can allow them to cover it up with the road. But we also reserve the right to make them dig that road up if we ever wanted to study it to a further degree. But
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty extreme circumstances. But in doing field work for archaeology, it gets me in the woods a whole lot. So while I'm doing archaeology, I'm also doing Bigfoot research, because I'm, obviously part of our job in between digging that hole every 20 meters is to watch the ground around us to see if there's what we call surface finds. Like if I'm walking across a bare dirt area and there's a projectile point or arrowhead laying there, then while that does not have any archaeological significance, it is a surface find and it's noted that way. So anytime I'm in the woods, I'm scanning the ground always. So, footprints, anything weird like that, you just develop an eye to find that sort of thing. So I
Mm-hmm.
won't say that one subject matter has not caused the other one to be changed any, but they overlap very nicely if that's what you're into. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people, I've got colleagues, they just blunder through the woods digging their hole and looking for projectile points, arrowheads. Uh, so they're not tuned in to that sort of thing. I have found things on archaeological projects, and when that happens, I kind of have to draw, based on where it's at. I either go straight into Bigfoot mode and document everything I can about it, or I'll flag it with my flagging tape and I'll come back after work. Because when we get done of a day, instead of laying around in a motel room watching TV or whatever, or going out to the bar and tying one on or something, having a few, I'll go back out to where we were working and I'll do calls, I'll do wood knocks, any of the, because I always pack a miniature Bigfoot kit in my truck with me. And I usually drive my truck on projects. Even though we'll have company truck, I drive mine so that it gives me the freedom to do this sort of thing of an evening. So I get to, even though I'm technically not being paid at that exact moment, I am being paid to be there. So in a weird sort of way, I'm being paid to do Bigfoot research. So, and I'm probably one of the few that can say that.
That is pretty good. Yeah, I've lost more money trying to do this than I've never made a penny.
Oh yeah.
Got a question here from one of our viewers here. Mick says, question for Gene, aside from his sighting, what's the next best evidence he has personally found and or examined, whether in the field or at a witness's home?
Probably the next best thing that I have gotten, I acquired in my backyard. We had a tree fall in the backyard. I don't know if we have enough time to get through all this or not, but we here where I live in the middle of a wildlife management area. It's almost 2,000 acres of hunting land, for lack of a better word. But it's a wildlife management area. We had a tree fall in the backyard, and I worked the tree up, and I was burning the brush in the backyard. Me and my son was out there. It finally burnt down enough to where I was comfortable to leave the bigger logs laying there smoldering. So I was walking back to the house. My son had done went in, but I was gathering up the gas can and all that sort of stuff, and I was packing it back. When all at once there was a giant, it's kind of hard to describe, but it was a giant, long drawn out moan that it just filled the air. And where I live, there's about 7 houses in a row right here on this road. And the wildlife area totally surrounds us except for these 7 pieces of property. And as soon as that moan happened, all the dogs in the neighborhood, of course, started howling. But when it was so loud that it startled me to the point that it took me a second or so to realize I was holding my cell phone in my hand and could hit record. And so I did that real quick. But this moan is almost like it was a dome. I could envision a dome in the air. And all the dogs their howls were hitting the dome. And this other thing was well above the dome. And so I contacted Cliff Brackman, and I told him about it. And I knew that he knew a gentleman that was doing a study on reported Sasquatch vocals. And so I sent it to Cliff. Cliff sent it to the gentleman. I cannot remember for the life of me what the guy's name was, but he sent it to him. And Cliff got back to me and said that the guy that was doing the study had originally wanted to say that it was a canine. But he said right at the very end of the vocal that it done what he called the Sasquatch signature sound. Something that he could pick up on his analyzer or a oscillograph, something that he could tell that every what he believed to be true Bigfoot vocals did this at the end. He
Would
did
that
not
have
share.
been Monongahela?
It could have been. It could have been him.
He does a lot of sound studies.
Right. It probably was. I just cannot think of what the gentleman's name was. Matter of fact, I may not even have known for sure what the gentleman's name was. I just knew Cliff had talked about it, and so I sent it to him. Actually, I just wanted Cliff's opinion on it, and Cliff said, "Well, I've got a guy that is, or know a guy that is doing this study. Do you care if I share it with him?" And I said, "Absolutely." Now, this gentleman did not tell me what the signature move was, but it was there. And so he said that as far as the data he had collected with all the vocals that were more than likely a Sasquatch origin, mine had the signature move that the Sasquatch made.
Wow, that's incredible.
And that happened in the backyard. And about a week later, I heard it again in the front yard, and I recorded another little snidbit of it. As a matter of fact, me and my son heard it again about 2 weeks ago. I had just come off of another podcast, and I went outside to make sure the truck was locked and all that stuff, and I heard it then. And it went on for a pretty good little bit. But it was real far in the distance, but I could still hear it, and I recognized the sound for what it was. Now, another friend of mine, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but another friend of mine, he had an encounter at another spot that is 5 miles from my house. They actually made a TV show out of it. It was on These Woods Are Haunted. Him and 2 of his friends got run off a mountaintop by a family group of Sasquatches. He told me that the television show kind of depicted like there was 2, maybe 3 at most individuals. But he said that as soon as they got off the mountain, that the one right behind him let out a yell. And he said there were 7 responses going all the way back up to the top of the mountain. So there were 7 of them. And that is within 5 miles of my house. There's a third point where we do a lot of investigation, and it's 5 miles from my house, and it's 5 miles from the location where my friend got run off the mountain. So it makes a perfect 5-mile triangle. And so we do a lot of research right here in our backyard anymore. When I first got truly serious about this, I tried to put together a group, and I put a Yahoo page on yahoo.com called Bigfoot in Kentucky, and basically just let anybody join it that wanted to join, because I was looking for certain like-minded people. And there were a couple of people that joined that have went on to do good things in the Bigfoot world. But they were, I don't want to say they were overzealous, but they wanted to run out and immediately start doing research. They didn't want to pre-plan nothing. They didn't want to, come up with an SOP of how we're going to do this, standard operating procedure. They just wanted to meet in the woods and go running out looking around, which is fine. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But that's not collecting any scientific data.
No.
So I just kind of let that fall to the wayside. And when I did go back to college my second time and got my degree, because I got my first degree at a 2-year college in communications, radio and television broadcasting. And then I went back to Eastern Kentucky University and got my anthropology degree. So when I got into the anthropology program, I was anthropology. The people that you meet are like biologists. They're the guys that are in forestry stuff, agricultural stuff. You meet all these like-minded people. And so I never made no bones about my Bigfoot encounter. It's what happened. I know it's what happened. I don't need to convince anybody else that this happened. Damn it, I was there. I know what happened,
Yeah.
So I don't have to convince anybody, and I'm not embarrassed by it. Some people think I'm crazy, and that's okay. Sometimes I get in positions where I'm getting to talk to a landowner, and I'll say, you may think I'm crazy, and that's okay, but do you ever have any weird sounds around here? And you'd be surprised how many people would not tell you that they saw a bit or heard a Bigfoot, but they will tell you about something weird that happened. And you can put it together. But anyway, I'm working alongside of all these other people, and on a professional side, they don't like to admit to it, but you get them off alone or in a private conversation. Oh yeah, I believe in Bigfoot, and so I was able to actually pull together a group of scientifically minded people to form the Kentucky Center of Bigfoot Research. We're full of anthropologists, biologists, guys with various forest degrees. So, we all know what's going on in the woods, be it daylight, dark, whatever. Usually nothing is unexplainable to us, especially if we give the Bigfoot topic leeway into the events that happen or whatever. Like, we hear a weird sound, and one person may say, hey, is that a Bigfoot? One of the biologists will go, no, that's a red fox. We know the sounds, and as a group, we work well. We have one member that is not a degreed professional, and that is simply because they have had a couple of face-to-face encounters, and they own a large piece of property, and so never officially made them a member, but we've always kept them in the loop. They keep us in the loop whenever anything happens on their property. So the whole group is made up of educated professionals, and you don't have to be educated to be an expert in a field. You can study it on your own, and you can become a citizen scientist and be just as good as anybody else. I mean, I'm not Meldrum, I'm not Bendenagel, I'm not Krantz. Those guys are doctors. I just got a bachelor's degree. I know just enough to be dangerous, so to speak. But it fits the means fit the end, because I studied the great ape stuff to study Bigfoot. I didn't specialize in lemurs. I didn't specialize in chimpanzees or anything like that. I learned just the anatomy, the stuff that I thought was relevant to where my interest lied. The rest of my degree was totally focused on archaeology, because I knew that's where I could make a living at. So that's where we're at. And, we would go out on these planned expeditions, and we have a standard operating procedure that we follow. Everybody knows their job. We have the equipment now. It's took a long time to build up, thermal cameras are not cheap, you know.
Boy, ain't that the truth.
Luckily, where I'm a musician, I have tons of sound equipment and recording equipment, so that was never a problem. You know, I can put enough PA in my truck bed to, I could broadcast a sound here in Kentucky and you could hear it in Virginia. You know, I can crank it out. But you know, being able to see into the dark is a totally different thing. I don't have thermal cameras laying around, so it took a while. But we would go out and we would have things happen. I'm not saying that we just wandered around the woods and come back empty handed every time, but nothing of great excitement ever really seemed to happen until my son turned 11 years old, I think it was. And he had a little group of 2 or 3 buddies that was always around. And they wanted to go squatching. They watched Finding Bigfoot. They listened to us sit around and talk. They, you know, saw us leave and come back covered in mud the next morning or whatever. And they were fascinated by it. And they wanted to go squatching. So I had a woman contact me and said that they got run out of this particular holler by something screaming and throwing rocks at them. And I remember thinking, there's no way in the world this happened. This is a popular spot. This is where people go fishing every weekend. Kids go out there and park. Kids go out there and party. You know, people are there all the time. But I thought, this is a good place for me to take the boys, let them get out, let them do their thing. So we go out to the reservoir, and it's the first full moon of February. Now, that's an important detail. So it had been raining for like 3 days. The whole reservoir was flooded. It was up high. And we go to the holler side that she said that they had been ran out of. Now, this is a paved road, mind you. Granted, it's a dead end, but it's a paved road nonetheless. So we go to the end of the road where a long slough is at. We turn the truck around, and I just stop in the road. It's February. There's nobody out here fishing. There's nobody hunting. You know, maybe some kids come out to want to go parking or something, but that's going to be it. And I get the boys out and I say, okay, guys, you've watched the shows. You know what we do. Knock yourselves out. Have all the fun you want. So they've got their phones out and they're, you know, just like they're on YouTube, they're talking to their phone. Hey, everybody, we're out here at so, you know, they're doing the whole spiel. And they do some tree knocks. They blow on a whistle a couple of times. They do yells. And let me set it up a little bit. We're right beside the slough. Now, like I said, it's February, so it's foggy across the water, but the sky is clear. It has finally quit raining, full moon. You could see forever if there was no fog. And we're on one side of the slough, and the other side of the slough is about, I'm going to say 200 yards. I really need to go laser it and get a good, accurate reading on it so I can quit bouncing that number around, but I'm going to say 200 yards. And my son tells me, he says, I'm going to do my famous 2 shorts and a long call. So he goes, woo, woo, woo. And within 2 seconds, I'm sitting here looking across the lake, and I glance up, and there is a rock that is between a cantaloupe and a baseball size, or a cantaloupe and a basketball size rock coming from the other side of the lake, 200 yards away. And it comes within 20 yards of where I'm standing and splashes in the water. Now, when it splashed, I know you've heard a beaver tail splash. When they
Oh
splash,
yeah.
it's just like you walked up to the pool out there and you smack the water. You get that smack sound. You
Yep.
don't get that bloop sound, you know.
That's right.
This rock hit the water. It went deep. Water went high. It rained back down. You know, because I've had people tell, "Oh, it was a beaver." No, it wasn't a beaver. Just simply by the sound. Forget the fact I saw the rock coming through the air. You know, let's totally disregard that. I can defeat the beaver sound just by the splash that it made. So this rock comes through the air, lands in the water. I immediately tell the boys, now they're 10 and 11 years old, and I've got three of them with me. And I did not come prepared. I'll be the first to say it. I'm usually well armed when I go and do this. All I have with me is a 9mm pistol. That is not a Sasquatch caliber gun. Uh, so I tell the boys, I say, guys, get in the truck. I'm trying not to freak them out, you know, which I don't even know why I bothered to tell them to get in the truck because they are hanging out all the windows of the truck. Looks like the Clampetts coming into town, you know. And so I'm standing there and I've got my flashlight and it's a good light, but it's foggy on the water. And so this flashlight is not cutting through the fog. And I hear something coming to the water. Now it's not a splash or anything like that. It's more like a canoe or a john boat drifts by. You know, you hear just a little bit of ripple, and that's it. And then I get to hearing this clacking sound like that, and I can't see nothing. It's stationary. I shine my light where I think it's at. I'm not seeing anything. And so after about 15 minutes of this, it fades away. I don't hear nothing leave the water. I don't hear no splashes, none of that. It's just, it's over. So we leave. So the next day, I messaged Bobo, James Bobo Fay, because I'd met all the guys off Finding Bigfoot. That's how I knew Cliff. That's how I knew Bobo and Matt and Renee, all of them. So anyway, I messaged Bobo. I think it was message. I could have texted, but I'm pretty sure it was message. And I told him, I said, "Hey, Bo, this is what happened last night. Have you ever encountered this?" Talking more in reference to the clacking sound. And he said, "I've experienced that twice." He said, "That was a large male and he was angry." He said, "You were right to leave with the boys." He said, "But go back." And I said, "Well, okay, we'll go back." So me and the guys, sometimes it was just my son, sometimes it was all of us. We went back every other weekend, it seemed like, out there. Nothing. Not another, not a wood knock, not a rock, not a footprint, not a howl, nothing. And so I'm like, okay, maybe it was just a fluke. So our one team member who owns the farm contacted us and said, "My cousin thinks she saw one on the back of the farm, and we've been hearing sounds. Do y'all want to come up?" So I get the boys and we go back up there. Now, I planned this to be on the first full moon of February, was when we went. So we go up there, and her place is about an hour and 45 minutes from where we live. So we go up there for a while. We got the parabolic mics, we got the thermal cameras, we got it all out, the call blaster, everything. We hear a few things that are questionable at best, you know, nothing I would say, "Hey, that was a Sasquatch," but we heard some interesting things. So we leave there about 1:30 in the morning, and we go to where the original rock throwing incident happened. So we go to the exact same spot. I've got the truck turned around and everything. It's the exact same truck. It's the exact same 4 people stepping out of the truck. And the first thing we had to do was go to the bathroom. We'd been in the car for an hour and a half at this point. So we're standing there doing our business, and another rock gets thrown at us. And my son saw this one. He said it was the size of, he said it was like a big cantaloupe looking rock. And the exact same spot, the exact same lunar date 1 year later, the exact same 4 people, and the exact same pickup truck. And we get another rock thrown at us. Nothing else happened, just the rock. But we like to say that he was just saying, "Hi, I remember you." So that's just one of them interesting things. But we've had quite a few things happen in this triangle, especially out there at the reservoir. And since I started doing the podcast, and the way that happened was I contacted Wes from Sasquatch Chronicles to find out if he had a searchable database, like an Excel sheet or something, of all the show locations where the witness was from, because I was trying to run down all the Kentucky places. And of course he didn't have anything like that, but he said, "Hey, would you care to come on to the show?" Well, I'd never done one before, so I was a little hesitant, but he convinced me, so I went ahead and done it. And then after that, man, the floodgates have just opened. It seems like I'm getting requests all the time, and turns out I really enjoy doing it. So,
Well, and I'm gonna bring this up too. You know, I don't live very far from Kentucky at all. I ended up making several trips to the doctor in Pikeville, Kentucky. I don't know if you know where Pikeville is.
yes, sir.
But anyway, it seems to me like here in the coal fields, where there's been coal mining activity, it seems like you have a lot of sightings.
Yeah.
Now, do you find that true in Kentucky where you're at?
Yes. I really don't think that there's anything supernatural about that statement. I believe that statement is factual, because where the mining has happened is usually an isolated area.
Yep.
I know in Kentucky, the coal mining in the east side of Kentucky, the mines are all underground just about, because that's where the Appalachians are. You go to the west side of Kentucky, it's all strip mine land.
Yep.
When they strip mine a piece of land, it's pretty much useless for probably the next 1,000 years, unless they go in and spend a lot of money and try to rehabilitate the land. Just like John Prine's song, they stripped all the land till it was forsaken. It's, it's true. But those, like in West Kentucky, every time if there's a divot in the ground where they've dug a hole, even if it's just a foot deep or water, it's going to fill up with water. So there's a lot of swampy areas. There's a lot of areas that are very, very thick with vegetation that has grown up, because once you strip the good dirt off, what you're going to get is you're going to get the weeds, you're going to get the briars, you're going to get the not the invasive species, but the undesirable species that grow. There's a plant out in West Kentucky, I think it's called Yancinella or something like. Anyway, we call it tumbleweed. You just about can't walk through it. It's so thick, and that's what grows all over the strip mined areas. Now, in the east side of the state, it's all underground, but it's usually very rough roads to get to where the mine shafts start. So, these areas are all isolated and decimated, and not a lot of people are around them. I know if you grew up in, Harlan County, a coal mine doesn't bother you. You'll go right straight and hunt right beside it, but an outsider's not going to go there. There's not going to be a tourist want to go see old, number 97 mine, you know. So these are areas that are not frequented. So
Mhm.
if people in civilization are not active at a spot, Mother Nature will take back over very quickly. And you know, the first thing comes in is the vegetation, and then the animals come back. So I have no qualms or any disagreements with your statement that the mining and Sasquatch areas tend to go well together.
And I
But
think it's got a lot to do, like here where I live at in Southwest Virginia, they do mountaintop removal strip mining, where they
right,
just level the top of the mountain. And then they come back in, and you know, federal law now, they have to try to reclaim that, and they do have to try to take care of it. But it's pretty much useless for
yeah,
about anything. But they plant a lot of, I think it's Crown Lespedeza, and
yeah, that's the plant I was talking. Espediza, that's the one
yeah,
I was talking
Crown
about.
Lespedeza, and it's a relative of clover, but the deer love it.
Yeah,
They absolutely love it, and they'll come in and they'll eat, and I think that's what draws a lot of them in. Another question I've got for you, and I usually keep all my questions written down and things like that I want to ask, and I research the guests pretty hard and stuff. But I'm gonna go off script some.
sure.
Normally, I ask, you know, it's a weird question: animal, mineral, or vegetable, to see what people think about Bigfoot, whether it's a real animal or if it's extraterrestrial or interdimensional or spiritual. But you said it's a living, breathing animal. That's your thoughts on it. Now,
Yeah.
with that being said, you know, I'm in the same camp, and I've got some working theories too. And everybody that does, you know, any kind of Sasquatch research has working theories. But my working theory is that I'm kind of hung up between, you know, Sasquatch is a hominin or hominid. And there's a difference in those two words. You know, humans are both, because we are great apes and we are humans. We're sapiens. So my thing is when it comes to these things, you have two options. You have big gut, small brain, or you have big brain, small gut. And what's your thoughts? Do you think that it's more of the big gut, small brain, or do you think that it's more of the big brain, small gut?
Well, that's a good question, and you know, there and I've done a few shows where I've talked a whole lot about their morphology, how they're made up, what we can theorize their characteristics are based on eyewitness accounts. Now, let's let's break it down just a little bit. When you talk to a witness that has seen a Sasquatch, and they talk about the sagittal crest,
Mm-hmm.
that they talk about it having a cone head, uh, that the correct term for that is sagittal crest.
That's
Now,
cool.
that mechanism is just a bone that is
Mm-hmm.
attached to the skull. It is part of the skull. But the whole reason for that is it's part of the chewing mechanism.
It's muscle attachments.
It's for muscle attachments because a Sasquatch, if you look at a Gigantopithecus jawbone, it is
Mm-hmm.
huge. It is absolutely the biggest jawbone you can put in your hands. It'll easily go over my face. So to be able to operate that mechanism, you got to have a lot of muscle attachment to get that chewing
Mm-hmm.
strength. Uh, Same deal with when people see them going away from them, and they describe this bell shape on the back of their head. That is the neck muscles that come down because something has to support that big mandible and that big head
Mm-hmm.
in the back and keep it to the body, because the foramen magnum is more than likely center of the skull, just like on
Mm-hmm.
a Homo sapien. That's where the spinal cord and everything comes down through and goes into the spine. So you got all of these muscle attachments. Now, all of that is for, like I said, the eating mechanism. So their diet probably consists of a lot of, well, it consists of a lot of things, but a woody vegetation
Mm-hmm.
would have to fall in there somewhere just simply by the sheer size of what their molars probably are. And
Mm-hmm.
all of this is based on of Gigantopithecus. You know, when they first found that molar in Asia, I mean, it's the size of my thumb, you know, and that's a tooth. So you can imagine how big a jawbone is, whether it has a 3-2-1 or a 4-2-1 dental complex. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big molar to be one of them if there's possibly three of them.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody, another thing everybody says is, well, we didn't see any canines. There was no fangs, you know. Well, there's a reason for that. If they're eating woody, dense vegetation, you can't just chomp it. You've got to be able to grind it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the jaw moving left to right while you're eating. So if you've got upper and lower canines that are elongated, well, then you've just made a thing that you cannot grind your teeth with.
Yep.
That's why that is not there. Uh, but just because their head is so big does not necessarily mean that they're big brained. They've just got a lot of muscle and a lot of dense bone.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, their cranial capacity, you know, I think in my mind that they're probably somewhere between a great ape and a chimpanzee. But at the same token, that doesn't mean that they're not overly intelligent. It just
Mm-hmm.
means that they don't have a big brain. They can have a small brain. You know, crows recognize people. You know, if you treat a crow nice, he'll treat you nice. You treat him bad, he'll treat you bad. You know, just because you have a small brain does not mean that you do not have a large level of intelligence.
That's right.
Uh, so I believe that you can actually have both. I believe that they do have a elongated gut. That's got to be part of the reason for their torso being as long as it is,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people talk about a Sasquatch's legs are really not out of proportion with a human being. It's the torso and then the arms that hang down below the knees. So with an elongated gut, that allows for more digestional time in the upper and lower intestines. Let's just assume that they have the same gut tract that we do, but
Mm-hmm.
it gives them more room to digest the plant-based or woody-based material that they may be eating.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm satisfied they eat berries, they eat meat, you know, they eat everything that a uh, omnivore would, you know. Uh, they're not straight carnivore, they're not straight herbivore, they're omnivores. They eat both meat and vegetation, just like Homo sapiens do. So if you're eating broad based leaves, you've got to be able to grind them up. So you got to have big teeth. You have big teeth, you got to have a way to support those teeth. If you have a way to support those teeth, you got to have something to support the head. And all of this just, it falls right
Mm-hmm.
into place on what physical descriptions of Sasquatches are. So I
Mm-hmm.
believe that they're very intelligent, uh, might be more intelligent than human beings are. Uh, they don't have the technology that we do, but that doesn't mean that they're not as intelligent as we are, if not more intelligent, because they have somehow managed to avoid discovery. Let's say it that way. You know, when the moment of discovery happens and the scientific community says, yes, this is real, that's discovery. Uh, Existence, we all know Bigfoot exists. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here. That's why you're here. That's why the audience is here. You know, We're either absolutely fascinated with it and we want it to exist, or we've had an encounter and we know it exists. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a believer. I
Yep.
reserve belief for religion. I'm a knower. I've seen them. I know that they are there. I have no questions about that. You can talk to your blue in the face and try to convince me otherwise. You're not going to do it. So I believe that they are very intelligent, but at the same time, I believe they have the big gut. So to
Mm-hmm.
answer your original question, I can't pick between one or the other because I believe it's both.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing too, I know you mentioned Gigantopithecus, which I think technically there's like maybe three different species of Gigantopithecus, but most of what
Uh,
they're working with is black eye,
yeah, let
Gigantopithecus black eye.
let me clear something up because I stuck my foot in my mouth when I was on Wes's program. I was Wes led me into a evolutionary discussion that I had not prepared myself for, so I misspoke. I had said that there were two Gigantopithecus. I said that there was Gigantopithecus blackie and there was Gigantopithecus garii. Now, that's where I screwed up. Garii was a Australopithecus, wasn't a Gigantopithecus. So after the show, I caught what I had done, but it was too late. Show was done, you know, out in the ether. It's for everybody. So there started being comments about it. And some woman come on and said, I'll have to research this Gigantopithecus garii that Gene talked about because I'd never heard of that one. I had heard of Blackie and this other one. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I've never heard of this one. And it was, I've got notes here. It was Gigantopithecus balasorensis. Now, don't hang me if that's wrong because I've never heard anybody say it. I'm reading it. So, but anyway, then there was Gigantopithecus gigantus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's three. So this is where it gets confusing. Gigantopithecus gigantus turned out to be the same animal as Gigantopithecus balasaurus. So we had three, then we went to two. Then they decided that Gigantopithecus gigantus or balasarensis, whichever one you want to call it, wasn't even a Gigantopithecus. So we went from three to one, which is Gigantopithecus blackie.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's it got real muddy, and I got egg on my face pretty good over that one. But it's all
Well, I
just
mean,
because I
when it
had not prepped.
when it comes to these different pre-humans, there is so much stuff that absolutely cannot be, you know, differentiated between. It's incredible. Uh,
Yeah,
like I know Dr. Meldrum at one point was working on a robust. He's he was working on a theory where he thought Sasquatch might be the descendants of a robust Australopithecine, something similar to Paranthropus.
yeah,
And there was two. I think there's two species of that, which is Paranthropus boisei, and then there was a Paranthropus
Garai.
robustus. And robustus lived, I think, in the southern part of Africa, and I think boisei lived in the northeastern part.
Right. Let's see here. I've actually got a textbook here. If I can get enough light on, I could maybe tell you what they are if you really want me to. Uh, if I can find it. But yeah, Paranthropus was Meldrum's pick for it. Uh, if he didn't go with Gigantopithecus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm eating up too much time, but yeah, you are correct. There is
Yeah,
two. There was two of them.
I don't really
Uh,
see. either one of those, species, either robustus or boy's eye, having the body mass to be something like Sasquatch. And then again, too, there's actually been so much interbreeding throughout primitive species. Everybody always thought that all these different species were just separated,
Right.
but that's not necessarily true. They found now that just about everyone who has European ancestry has a certain amount of Neanderthal DNA. They have found now that, like, the people of Papua New Guinea have the highest concentration of Denisovan DNA. And there's not just one big great migration, through Siberia and across the Bering Strait and into the United States and things like that. I think it's a multiple branch of different species coming into the U.S. from multiple places. And with that being said, that there was, like, at one point 7 pre-humans that existed at the same time.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You had Denisovans, you had Homo sapiens, you had Neanderthals, you probably had some
Florensis.
Homo floresiensis, and which they believe, if I'm not mistaken, I do not have a degree. I graduated college and joined the Marines.
Right.
But I believe that they think that Homo floresiensis is actually a Lord, I completely lost the name. But anyway, it was a different species of human that actually shrank where it was on an island. But as far as that goes, with all these different beings coming together, I don't think there's a clear path to what Sasquatch really is. I think that eventually, like, I know there's a new DNA study being done in the University of North Carolina.
Yeah.
Or is it North Carolina State? Anyway,
I think it's North Carolina State, I believe.
Yeah, Darby Orcutt is the one that's working on it. And I'm kind of interested to see what those results are going to come out and be, because I'm kind of curious to see if they might have some of the same traits that may have possibly been found in Melba Ketchum's study, where Sasquatch is part human.
Well, one thing about that, and I don't, DNA is not my expertise by no means, but when you have to add an amplifier to draw out the DNA sample, to get a sequence on the DNA sample, and you have to add an amplifier. If you add human as the amplifier, then all of your results will have a human component to them. And I know I've heard some debates about it, and that is one of the problems with Medelba's study, was that they used human amplifiers instead of a neutral amplifier. It gets over my head real quick, but I've heard guys that are more on the DNA side than I am, and that was how they described it, that there was a serious problem with hers because of the amplifier that they had to add. So hopefully the people at North Carolina State will use a neutral amplifier, or, I don't know what the answer to that is. Maybe, seems to me like if you used a primate amplifier, you're going to get the same thing. It's all going to be primate. Yeah. So it seems to me like the amplifier has to be a neutral source to get, okay, this is what it truly is. And, maybe if you could get a DNA sample, you could get HD video, and you could get footprint cast, all, from
in
the
one
same
spot.
all from the same encounter. You may be able to prove existence with just that. But it's going to take a body on the table. Everything that has ever been, the I'm drawing a blank on the word I'm looking for. The Anyway, the categorization of everything is because we've had type specimen one, you
Mm-hmm.
know, so we've got to have that to compare it to. So until there is one laying on a table, they pull the DNA off that one laying there, then they can say, okay, this DNA matches that.
Mm-hmm.
Until that happens, I think somebody will always find a way to dispute any evidence like that until there is one laying on a table,
Well, and
regardless of what you get.
one of the things that kind of led me into what I was saying, I do have a little bit of faith that there is some human in Sasquatch because, and I just throw it out, and I say this all the time too. I'm part Native American.
Yeah.
I'm Cherokee and Shawnee on my dad's side, and I'm Cherokee on my mother's side. And you working there with Native American artifacts and things in Kentucky, more than likely you're working with the Shawnee Indians
Yeah.
that are in
Yeah.
that
That
area.
was my great grandmother was pure Shawnee.
But when you're dealing with natives and everybody throughout Appalachia, if you're from Kentucky or Virginia or West Virginia or whatever, throughout Appalachia, you're part Native American. But now the Cherokee and the Shawnee both have huge stories of how Sasquatch would come in and would take native women and breed with them, and they would have viable offspring.
Right.
So that kind of leads me to think that whatever Sasquatch is, that it is close enough that it can have viable offspring.
Yeah. And I don't remember the exact story, but there was a tale of a woman who was supposedly, this was in Russia. I think it was Russia or somewhere over there, one of the third world countries. But this
Mhm.
woman was supposedly the offspring of a human Sasquatch type creature mating. And they actually were trying to get her offspring to do DNA analysis on them. And
Mhm.
I think it did come back that there was something weird about their DNA. I don't
Mhm.
remember what it was. It was just a story on a show one time. I didn't put a whole lot into it, but yeah, all you know, the Shawnee and the Cherokee, they do have those folklore that happened, but all Native Americans have a folklore oral tradition that
Yes, sir.
involves a Sasquatch of some sort.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know of anybody other than the Shawnee and the Cherokee that have ever said that they, stole women for mating purposes or whatever. I think that there might have been another tribe that said that they killed people for cannibalistic purposes,
Mhm.
but I think Shawnee and Cherokee are the only two that have ever had a mating.
Which now in Cherokee lore, they have two different types. One type of Sasquatch lived with the Cherokee and all of that, and was actually friendly with the Cherokee and possibly
Yeah,
even traded back and forth. There's stories of Bigfoot bringing in firewood and meat and things like that when the village was in
yeah,
trouble. But also the Cherokee had another one that I believe the name of it was the Nunyaway, and that it actually hunted and preyed on Cherokee Indians and would eat their liver and their brains. Which I thought, and I've said this a bunch on the show too, so I'm sure our listeners are probably tired of me saying this, but that's an oddly specific thing that would eat the liver and the brains. But those are two of the most fatty and nutrient rich organs
right.
in the human body, which
Yeah,
would make sense because as an animal feeding on a human, that's the two things that they want. They
right.
want nutrient rich and high fat content. So,
Well, it's like when a buzzard attacks a calf, the first thing it does is pluck the eyeballs out,
yep.
and it's for the same reason. Um, I can tell you a pretty good one that's kind of strange, and it gets a little bit into the crazier side of things. But there was a woman down in Tennessee who wrote a book called 50 years with Sasquatch. I want to think her name was Janice something. I can't really remember, but she was, you know, by all intents and purposes, her story was pretty far-fetched. She had said that her family had lived on the same farm for multiple generations. They knew the Sasquatches that were there. They even had family trees for the Sasquatches. And one of the main Sasquatches' name was Fox. And she told the story how Fox had a very limited vocabulary, but would actually come to her and ask for garlic. And she would give them garlic and figured out that the garlic kept flies and mosquitoes away off of them. So when I first heard this was back in the maybe early 90s, and her story, you know, she was saying that this happened in the early 80s. So you got a woman telling a very far-fetched story about a Sasquatch coming to her asking for garlic because it gets rid of flies and mosquitoes. Now, let's fast forward to 2018. Sweet Pro Animal Feed, which a buddy of mine was the vice president of, they come out with a proprietary secret in their feed that keeps flies and mosquitoes off of horses. And that secret is garlic.
Garlic. Yep.
So the same thing that this, by all intents and purposes, this crazy woman in Tennessee is saying Bigfoot wanted garlic for, is now the scientific gold mine that this national feed company is now discovered keeps flies and mosquitoes off of horses.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Tom Seawood?
Who?
Tom Seawood. He's
Seawood.
Yeah, he's a native. I think he's actually from Canada originally, but he lives in Washington State now. We had him on the show a while back, and he talked about how that the Sasquatch would steal garlic from their camps.
Oh, okay.
One of the first things that they did was they stole garlic from their camps.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting when you get into it how similar all those things was. I think that lady, I think her name was Janice something.
Yeah,
but, I believe she worked with Igor Burtsev from Russia.
Yeah, he come and stayed with her for like a week and said that she probably knew more about Sasquatches than anybody in the world. But said nothing happened while he was there. But he also said that she told him nothing would happen while he was there, because she said that the Sasquatches were so interactive with her family and her that if anybody else come around, they knew it immediately and just would not do anything. Of course, that's a good excuse for your lie not to be observable too, you know, so you can play both sides of the fence on that. But he said that she told him before he ever left Russia that nothing would happen while he was here. And he said she was right, nothing happened. So I think there might have been a few strange sounds that they heard, but that was it.
Well, I mean, even in like that goes along with, even if the biggest myth, there's always a grain of truth in it.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you know, you got to look through some of that.
Yeah, it's like that whole stereotyping that we were talking about when we first started, you know. Back when people that sound like us first come out of the hollers to the big city, they weren't the brightest in the world in the big city. But you take them big city people and take them up that holler, and they're just as dumb as you are, you know.
That's exactly right.
Jared Diamond said it depends on where you're at in the world as to how stupid you are.
That's exactly right. Well, Gene, we've been on this for about an hour and 45 minutes now, so I'm going to have to end the show here. I greatly appreciate you coming on, It's been a wonderful show. Do you care to hang on for a few minutes after I end the show?
Absolutely. We got hours worth of stuff to talk about, so I'll be right here.
Okay. Appreciate everybody coming on tonight, and a little bit of controversy going on in the chat this evening, and I will reiterate one thing. I don't tolerate disrespect. Be respectful to each other. That's what this is all about. I push for respect for everybody. Okay, if you believe in the woo, that's wonderful. I may not agree with you, but that doesn't mean that you should be hateful to somebody. And then in the same respects too, if you believe in the woo and somebody don't try to push that down their throat. So with that being said, in the comment section, if I hate to say this, if you can't act right, you'll get bounced. And that's the only way I can keep this going. I won't tolerate any disrespect towards anyone. But with that being said, I really appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. We've had a wonderful show. We've had a wonderful guest. And I truly appreciate everyone for watching. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to Sasquatch Watch Radio. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Stay connected. Don't miss our next exciting show, airing next Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. To stay updated, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd also love for you to join our Facebook page at facebook.com/Sasquatch Watch Radio and check out our website at squatchradio.com. Share your stories and feedback. Your feedback means the world to us, so please give us a thumbs up on our shows and let us know what you think. Have you had an encounter? If you've had a sighting or encounter, we want to hear from you. Reach out to us through our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. And if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next Monday night.